All right, Sully, let's get to our favorite dynasty, the Chiefs dynasty. This is a dynasty, right? Or we're a full-fledged dynasty no matter what happens, or do they have to win?
I would say that they win this one. It's clear cut, no doubt about it. They're a dynasty. If they, again, if they lose this one and they come back and win, however you were saying earlier, then okay, fine. We can start talking about where that ranks and if that qualifies. But certainly, you win this game. Yep, it's a dynasty. 3 out of 5. You are, and honestly, you've reached the Super Bowl in it's 4 out of 5. I'm not wrong in saying that. Like that's you. The fact that you were able to not only win 3 titles if you win this game, but make it there almost each and every single year. You've made it to the AFC Championship, and every year that Patrick Mahomes has been the starter, yeah, we're talking about not only a dynasty, but we're talking about one of the greatest dynasties that we've seen so far in the NFL. So it's pretty remarkable what we're seeing so early from this team. It almost reminds me a little bit more because, obviously up here it gets compared to New England all the time. What they're doing now reminds me more of the Patriots dynasty or the second leg of New England's dynasty, the most recent 3 Super Bowls, because it's just so dominant. You've been in the final 4 in the AFC Championship every single year, and if you don't even get to the Super Bowl, it feels like a disappointment. The inevitability of this Chiefs team is what strikes me and what has me considering them as one of the greatest dynasties we've seen so far.
Well, that's funny. You think that they're one of the greatest so far. Where would you rank them as far as the greatest dynasties in NFL history? And we'll assumes they win on February 11th on CBS in Las Vegas. They win that game. Where do you put this team as far as all the dynasties go?
Yeah, I think right now you probably put them in the top 5 of the greatest you've seen so far. And quickly, Patriots, Steelers of the 70s, 49ers of the 80s and early 90s, Cowboys in the 90s, and then I would probably put Kansas City. But if they win 3 out of 5 in the manner of which they've done it, I think you could talk about them squeaking up to that number 4 spot with Dallas and ousting that crew from the early 90s.
Yeah, I mean, the only one I would definitely put ahead of them is the Patriots because it was so long. And I don't look at it as 2 dynasties. I feel like because they went to the Super Bowl in 2007 and the Super Bowl in 2011, that it was that connected them all, even though they didn't win and they were going to the playoffs every year. It's not like and like you said, having the same head coach, same quarterback, I think plays into that. So I just view it as one long dynasty. I think the 49ers first dynasty in the 80s, a lot to be said for that. I mean, Bill Walsh kind of rewrote how the NFL does things. I like them there, but I think you could make the argument the Chiefs are top 3 if they are able to win on Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, this is a team we're going to talk about for ages if they win. Just the Mahomes era. It's everything. It's Andy Reid. It's Patrick Mahomes. But with Andy Reid, if he wins, if the Chiefs win, where does this put him in the conversation as far as the best NFL coaches of all time?
I know. It's so funny because it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. This dude used to be clowned on for his clock management. I mean, he was the butt of a lot of jokes in the NFL, and I don't think modern NFL fans kind of realize that. But this dude was kind of clowned on for a lot of his tenure. Now we're talking about him, rightfully so, as one of the greatest head coaches that the league has ever seen. I mean, if he's able to hang on with the roster that they have, and certainly with Patrick Mahomes under center, we're talking about a dude that's not that far off. We talk a lot about Bill Belichick trying to get the Don Shula record. Don't sleep on Big Red. This guy could easily rack up double-digit win seasons for the next handful of years for as long as he wants to coach, and he'll be right in that conversation as well. So I don't know if he can do much to put himself in the Belichick, Shula, Landry kind of pantheon, plateau, whatever you want to say. But I would say he's that, at the very top of that next tier of great head coaches that the NFL has ever seen. I think that's certainly within range, and it probably already is still there.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the people used to clown on Reid for the way his teams always ended up in the playoffs, which was they ended up losing in the most shocking way possible. Let's not forget that this team blew a 38-10 lead to the Colts during Reid's first year with the team. Just imagine that, where everybody's saying this guy can't win the big one. He gets to the playoffs his first year in Kansas City. You go up 38-10 on the Colts, and you lose 45-44 in one of the craziest games, playoff games in NFL history. In 2016, in that postseason, they play the Steelers. The Steelers do not score a single touchdown, and the Chiefs still lose. So I think the Steelers got 6 Chris Boswell field goals, and Steelers end up winning 18-16. The next year, the Chiefs are beating the Tennessee Titans 21-3 in the playoffs. The Titans have no offense. There's no reason they should ever be able to come back from a 21-3 deficit. Marcus Mariota throws a touchdown pass to himself, and the Titans somehow come back and win 22-21. And you know what? The Titans end up firing their coach anyway. Not the Chiefs, though. They kept their coach, and their payoff was Patrick Mahomes. They trade up and get him, and everything has changed since then. And, it's funny to think about where these guys are. You mentioned Reed could sneak up there on the all-time wins list when you include playoffs. Don Shula's at 347. Andy Reid is getting close to 300. And if Belichick isn't coaching next year, I think Belichick is 50 wins ahead of Reid when you include playoffs and regular season. Well, if you go 13-4 next year and win 2 playoff games, now you're only 35 behind Belichick. And we don't know that Belichick's going to get another coaching job. He's going to be 72 next year. Teams might not want to deal with knowing that he's not going to be there long term. It's going to be a 2 or 3 year deal. So, yeah, I think you can definitely put Andy Reid in the conversation as one of the 5 best coaches in NFL history. But, Sully, can you do that with Patrick Mahomes? He already one of the 5 best quarterbacks ever. What's going on? What's your take on where he stands historically?
I wrote about it earlier this week, because a lot of, obviously the conversation is turned into, is he going to pass Brady? Has he already passed Brady? And certainly that's premature, but you got to start somewhere, right? And the fact that he is already on a trajectory that in many respects exceeds Tom Brady's output in his first 6 seasons as a starting quarterback. And if he wins this latest Super Bowl, he would tie Tom Brady with the most amount of Super Bowls over that stretch as well, is remarkable. And so I think it does get lost, though, about where he already stacks up in amongst the greatest playoff quarterbacks of all time. I mean, he is, I believe, 1 win away from surpassing Peyton Manning and a slew of other quarterbacks with 14. He would then have 15 playoff wins. And if he wins his 3rd, he, again, passes Manning, passes Eli Manning, passes a ton of all-time great quarterbacks who have 2 Super Bowl titles, to then being in that even rarer air of having 3. So as much as we talk about, okay, this guy might, one day pass Tom Brady, he's already knocking on the door of some of these dudes like Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, go down to John Elway. I mean, go down the list of these guys that he's already neck and neck with in NFL history in terms of his playoff totals, championships, go down the list. So if you want to call him a top 5 quarterback in NFL history, I wouldn't fight you too much, to be perfectly honest with you. And I try not to be a prisoner of the moment. But when you look at all of what he's accomplished so far, and then you project what he's going to be going forward, boy, it is something that we haven't seen before in the league.
Well, it's funny because after they won last year and beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl, I wrote a column that if Patrick Mahomes retired after that game, that I think he's a Hall of Famer. Well, you put him in the Hall of Fame, even though he'd only started 5 full seasons at that point, but you have 2 Super Bowl wins and everything you've done in the playoffs. And if he does win, if the Chiefs do win on Super Bowl Sunday and they beat the 49ers, you become one of only 5 quarterbacks in NFL history who have won 3 or more Super Bowls. You have Tom Brady with 7. You have Terry Bradshaw with 4. You have Joe Montana with 4. You have Troy Aikman with 3. That's it. That's the list. That's your entire list of, and I would think that most people would agree that Patrick Mahomes is more talented than Terry Bradshaw, than Troy Aikman, and then, you have Montana and Brady up there. So, and I think most people probably throw Peyton Manning in there with his 2 Super Bowl rings. So it does feel like that puts Mahomes absolutely in the top 5. And you said you wouldn't argue with anyone who wants to put him in the top 5. I would argue with people who want to put him out of the top 5 because I think that's where he belongs right now.
No, it's totally true. And I just quickly looked up the stats as well. most wins by a playoff quarterback in NFL history. Tom Brady has 35, ridiculous number. Joe Montana, 16, number 2. And then there's a cluster of quarterbacks with 14, including Patrick Mahomes. So we're talking about a guy that if he wins this Super Bowl, he becomes the third most winningest quarterback in playoff history. The guy's in year 6. It's crazy that we're already talking about him in that level. And the dudes that he's looking up at, Joe Montana and Tom Brady, and passing guys like Bradshaw, Elway, Manning. And, just if you keep going down the list further, I mean, and we're not even talking about that many games played. Like, I know some people might say, okay, but what are the games played? Patrick Mahomes played in 17 playoff games. This will be his 18th. Manning's played in 27. Elway's played in 22. Bradshaw, 19. He's doing it in less time than these quarterbacks as well over that same stretch. You look at yardage. I mean, it's remarkable. He throws for 160 more yards. He's passing Drew Brees. He's passing John Elway. It's the names that he's already putting himself up to. I know we talk about Brady, but boy, when you're starting already year 6 and you're past a guy like Elway and Manning, that's you can't sleep on that. That's rarefied air.
And the crazy thing is, we're talking about how good Andy Reid is, how good Patrick Mahomes is. And now you add this new wrinkle that the defense is actually good. I mean, the first few years, Mahomes didn't really have the benefit of having a great defense, which is something Tom Brady almost always had with Belichick there and being such a defensive genius. But this year, now you get to play with a defense that gave up the second fewest points in the NFL. A defense that gave up the 4th fewest passing yards, a defense that's good. How much do you think that adds to the do you think that can be sustained? Do you think Spagnuolo will stay? And how much do you think that helps this team as they look to continue their dynastic run?
A lot there. And you're right. This defense has been unreal. It's why we cautioned a lot of people going into these playoffs. Hey, listen, I know that the big story about Kansas City has been the wide receivers and they lead the league in drops and yada, yada. But they have one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the league, stable coaching. They can run the football and they have a shutdown defense. All of that is the perfect mix to win in the postseason and win a Super Bowl. And the question of, can that help them in this game? Certainly. It's going to give them an edge. You could argue that they have the best defense on the field, and that's against the 49ers unit that's in its own right fantastic. But what the Chiefs have been able to do this year is the type of thing that you need to do when you're trying to create a dynasty. It cannot just all be on the quarterback. It cannot just all be on the head coach. You need to be able to have other areas come up big. And that, to me, is been this defense year in and year out. With all the struggles that they've had, the one thing that they can lean on is that the offense is going to get the ball back quickly because the defense has been so good. So from this year, 2023 or 2024, they're going to put them in a position to win a championship and solidify themselves as a dynasty. Going forward, there's some questions because you have Chris Jones slated to be a free agent. I believe Snead is slated to be a free agent. You never know what Spags. I mean, obviously, he's not going to leave, outside of retiring. There's no head coaching spots for him to go to. So that's, a question mark going into 2024 and 2025. Can they keep these guys in-house? But if they can, these pieces are the makings of one of the top units in the NFL. And when you have that compared alongside Patrick Mahomes, yeah, the sky's the limit.